Hi friends, I'm back in my studio and I am finally warping up my loom, and I wanted to show you all of my trials and travails of warping up a loom. I've had trouble warping up my loom ever since I got it years ago, because I don't have a place in my house that's really good for warping a loom. And because you put tension on the yarn when you warp it, on the warp threads, you really have to have a place where you can put your loom on one end and it's not going to move. And you have to put your little stick on the other end, and you're going to stretch the fibers back and forth when you're warping it up. And I just can't find any place in my house that I can secure my loom with some clamps, and I can secure the stick on the other end without it moving and pulling that's the right distance. So this is the last solution I've come up with. This is in my studio. I'm going to turn this around here a little bit. This is a dresser, okay? And I have got my loom resting with one of its bars, its bottom bars, behind an open dresser drawer. And the dresser's pretty heavy, so it's not going to open that dresser drawer. And as I'm putting this yarn on here, I'm making a little bit of tension. It's not real tense, it's a little bouncy, but it's enough that it can pull, it would pull this loom if it was just sitting on a table. So it has to be secured to the table. So anyway, I've got it in a dresser drawer, but of course in the front end of it is just hanging. It's supposed to be on a table. So I've got a yardstick right here underneath this front bar, and I'm hoping that yardstick, that the weight of the loom will hold it. That would be disastrous. Okay, so here's the yarn. Now this is store-bought yarn. This is acrylic, okay, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then over here, okay, and I've got a stick dowel going all the way to the floor, and it's through the front latch of a little box that we have that's real heavy, so that's going to stay secure. It does slot a little bit, the warp is gradually pulling on it. This is the solution I've come up with this time because every time I do this I think there's got to be a better way. I've got my yarn sitting up here. I've got the yarn coming out of the ball, the skein, from the center, so it doesn't roll around or do anything funny. It'll stay solid there. I tied the yarn on this end to my back stick. This is a back stick back here. It has a matching front stick here. And you loop the yarn around the back stick. Then you put this little tool through it that has a little hook, and you put it through and you pull it. You'll see me do that. And then I have to slip it through. This is called the heddle. It's a rigid heddle. So it's not little strings or something. It's a nice solid plastic one. And I pull the yarn through and I pull it all the way down, and I'm not going to keep on turning it, but the camera, but I'll put it around that dowel and bring it back. So let me show you what that looks like. So here's the, because this is one continuous piece of string or yarn. So I hook it, pull it through the heddle, and there's wonderful tutorials online with this. You don't have to watch me do it, but I thought some of you who are friends might find this interesting. And now I'm going to take this in this loop, and I'm going to loop it over top of this dowel. Okay, so it's still attached here. And then I put my little hook through. And you kind of want to test the tension as you go along. Put the hook through there and pull the next little batch through. And it's feeding from the yarn ball. And you test this every once in a while to make sure that the tension is consistent. Pretty. It's an acrylic, and the reason I'm using acrylic is because I know it won't break. I've had kind of homemade or craft yarn before that I've bought and tried to put on as a warp under tension, and some yarn, if you pull it, it'll snap, and if you put it under tension, it'll snap, and you don't want to be in the middle of weaving a beautiful scarf and have your warp threads breaking on you. That would be terrible after all that work. So you want to make sure you pick warp threads that if you pull them or try to snap them, they won't break. Okay, because you are going to have some tension on your warp. So, so I'm using acrylic, and then I'm going to use the beautiful blue yarn that I've been hand spinning. That's going to be my weft. It's going to go the other way. And when you are weaving, it's interesting. This warp yarn that looks so dark and everything, it doesn't exactly disappear, but it is not the dominant yarn in the weave. The weft yarn that goes across ends up being Well, we're back with the loom, and I've zoomed in on the loom, and now we have cut the other ends of all of these strands, and Adam has helped me to roll all of them onto the back stick. So you see this is all the scarf yarn has been rolled up back there. And so these are the ends sticking through the heddle. And now what we have to do is for every pair that's coming out of a slot, one of them stays in the long slot and one of them has to come through this little hole. And this is where this little device comes in handy. On this other end, you have this little teeny hook. You have a big hook on this one and a teeny one on this end. And that's what you use to go through that itty bitty hole and hook that yarn, hopefully, and pull it through. Actually, I think the one that Adam made me almost works better. So now we'll hurry along this video. So let's continue tying up our warp strings to our back stick. Ooh, this is getting a little precarious. Is it going to stay? I hope so. It's been a great arrangement so far. Okay, now we're going to put this through our next knot. And notice how as I do this, this back stick starts to really stand proud here and pull toward. And that's really what you're doing is you have the top of your warp attached to this back stick, and then wrapped around this nice bar. And then you also have this end attached to this back stick. So you put this through those two strings of yarn around the back stick. It's like a zigzag almost. Back through the yarn. Try to get the knot out of the way as much as you can. Now we're going to tighten this up as we get toward the end. And I'll be honest with you, this is the warping up your loom can be the most challenging and time-consuming part of weaving. But there's no guesswork to it. It just takes practice. Okay. And I'm going to knot this very securely, but before I do that, I'm going to tighten. Now this is like tightening your shoelaces. Really, really tight. You go back and you grab the early ones and you pull and you tug. Really, when you're establishing your tension here on your warp strings. And if you don't do this well, then you're going to have a problematic weave. And what I have to do now is I have to get some buffering in here above these knots to get me up to a place where I can start my weave better. Let's lift the heddle up. Now I've caught that third piece in there, and I'm probably about to the point where I can stop doing this, and we'll tighten that up even more. Let's double this over and put in there. You can see how these yarns are doing a better job now of doing their back and forth zigzag. This one feels a little loose. That's because it's on the edge. Now I'll put it back down. And I'll take this one, put it back through the middle. If this were not just a scarf, then I would need some assistance to get that through there, but it's small enough that I can reach it. And we're going to start doing this business and pull it down. Okay, and let's get this one. This will help also to tighten up that edge yarn a little bit. And you never want to tighten too much on the edge. And I hope you can see how I'm going to have a lot of wasted yarn. Not wasted, it's just part of what's required. You have all this yarn at the end. Some of that will be the tassels, but then I have the knots, and all of this will not. Also, this is just kind of excess. So that's just part of doing the weave, and that's why you have to really allow for quite a bit extra inches. All right, that looks pretty good. We'll put that back over there, put away this extra junk yarn. Okay, and now I am going to move this to a table. And now we're back, and I'm going to show you how I finish up getting this ready, this warped up and ready to go. I'm now sitting at my desk, and you can see how this loom rests on the side of my desk, okay, if you have a wide enough surface like that. And so you can sit and rest it on your legs, and you don't have to have a floor loom to do this. Now, I've tied off my warp down here at the bottom, but I want to roll it back just a little bit so that I'm not starting to weave this close to my heddle. So I'm going to loosen the lock up here. I'm going to crank this wheel back here. And just get it down there at the bottom. Now I do have some paper that I'm going to be using to buffer between my yarn and this this bar that it's going to roll around. This is, I guess this is really what they call the back stick, is this really big stick. And you do put paper there to kind of buffer your yarn so it doesn't get damaged. But for right now, that's pretty good. I don't need to roll it back anymore. Now this is when you really look at getting your yarn nice and tight, so it's easy to work with, and you can crank this. There's a gear up here and a gear down here, and each one of them has a little locking mechanism. Very important. All right. And this is the yarn I'm going to be using. And it's going to really be the dominant color as we go up. So this scarf will not be this dark. It's going to be more like this with this as a background. So I'll bring you back after I get some of that started. Okay, I've tied my own homespun yarn onto the end of this stick here that you use to your shuttle. And then I am going to load the shuttle full of my yarn. And we'll fast forward this so you don't have to watch all of it. Okay, now you may have noticed that I loaded one side and then I loaded the other side. And you don't want to load so much. You don't want to have it to be so thick that you won't be able to pass it through your weave. And this is another reason I loved balling my own yarn, because I did a center feed that was really easy to get from my ball of yarn. And so it was very easy to pull that and not have my ball rolling around on the floor. Okay, so we will start with an upshed. And weaving is just the simplest thing. You want to make sure you leave a little bit of a tail over there. And after every pass, you go down and press. And you put it there. You go back the other way. Now there's many fancy ways to weave, but this is the simplest. With one color as your warp, and one type of yarn as your warp, one type of yarn as your weft. It makes it very simple. It's a good way to start. And you do want to kind of pinch your edges over here. If you pull them too tight, you're going to crimp that edge, and you really don't want to do that. So just give it a little pinch here. Another good piece of advice that was given to me, I think on a YouTube tutorial, is when you put your yarn through and you're looking for how it's placed here, you leave just a little pinch on this side. And then you want your weft yarn to kind of go up at a diagonal. And it's not hard to tell which way it's supposed to be, because you can tell if your yarn is going to get trapped by the weave or not. Of course, you want it to get trapped. So when I have the shed up, I start from this side. If I have the shuttle on my left side, then I know the shed should be down. It is a very fun thing to do. It's very repetitive. It's not very difficult, especially once you get some practice in. So this is what the weave looks like so far up close. These are those dark warp yarns. And here's my light. It's really not quite that light. This looks very washed out. The blues are actually much darker. But this is what it looks like. And it actually is also darker here. This makes it look like there's a lot of white in there, and there's not. That's all kind of this nice periwinkle blue. But I like how the hot pink you have a little panel of that in there. I think this is going to be a really pretty scarf color-wise with a lot of interest. If you weave and you use variegated yarn, you don't have to do other fancy stitches and stuff to add interest, because the variegation itself will give the interest. And I think that's what I'm going to get when I have both a variegated warp and a variegated weft. Thanks for joining me for this weaving so far. Hi YouTube. Hi YouTube friends. I'm finishing up this scarf and I thought I would share with you the end of this weave and how I tie it off and finish it up. So without further ado, I'll turn you down so you can see the weave. I'm on the lower shuttle right now, and I know this because I'm coming in from the left. I've probably been able to finish this weave in maybe a total of an hour and a half of weaving, just weaving time, of course, not warping up and everything. Hour and a half, 2 hours tops. I kind of do it for, oh, it may not even be that long. I do it for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then I go do something else. So I hardly ever sit down and weave for an hour. So I don't even think it would be over an hour and a half. Now, on this side down here, like I said, I'm pinching. You don't want to pull this thread so much that this last warp string goes inward. You want to make sure that it's staying straight down. You also don't want to leave so much on the edge when you pinch that you have a bump. So it's just kind of a skill you get used to with each pass. This is such an easy weave because I'm not changing my weft yarn at all. I'm just keeping the same so I can just go and go and go. Now I'm about to get to the end of this. You see, you get to, you're really close up to the heddle right here, and it's a little more difficult to squeeze this shuttle through. And when you get to that point, you kind of have to stop, and I've gotten to the end of my back stick. I could roll it out a little bit more, but if I roll it out all the way so that this other stick flips out, it'll be really difficult for the loom to pull apart the top threads from the bottom threads. I can show you that, but I don't want to go that far. And this is going to be a plenty long enough scarf without using up every little inch of that yarn up there. I'm real pleased with how this looks. It's got a lovely, complicated bluish, pinkish, reddish look. I think it's very pretty. All of that hot pink roving that I worked with, that was really kind of a pain to work with, but it really flickers in the pattern here, and I like that. Let me show you what I mean. Now, when I'm weaving, I go from this top spot to the bottom spot, back and forth. There's little slots here. But when I want to do anything with my weave, I have to put it into kind of a resting position, which is back here. There's another little slot. So there's 3 slots that your heddle can rest in, and this is the one in the back, okay? And when I put it back there, it's not going to come falling off of its space. So I'm going to put my yarn here and show you when I loosen this. If I pull this all the way, like this, I can get that to come really far, but it's going to have difficulty separating these two, and I don't really want to do that. That gives you lots more yarn, but some of that I'm going to want for my fringe on the edge. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and line that back up. And you really, of course, you don't want to be breaking your yarn, but the tighter you get this on the top comfortably, without putting too much strain on it, the easier it will be to weave. Because the more tension you have here, the better your heddle does of lifting up those top ones like that. Now see, the top shed is easier to do when it's tight like this. But the bottom one, there's just less space in there. And so you kind of get to the point where you're squeezing your shuttle through. So I think I'll be done with now. I'll do that. Now I'm going to cut a nice tail here because it will be included in my fringe. So I'm done with this, and I'll put that back onto a ball. Okay. Now, the way that you take this off of here is I'm going to take 4 at a time. 4 strings. And you pull them down here and you knot them. And seriously, that is your fringe. Okay? And I go for 4 more. Okay, now I get to roll my scarf off. Now on this end of the scarf, obviously I need to take out the these trash yarn that I used at the end. Pulling out the trash yarn can be tricky. Once you get it started, it usually works okay. This was a very long piece that I went back and forth with. It probably is just easier if you just used single pieces that didn't loop around and go both directions. This I did 4 times. Oh my goodness. But you can just slide it out like that. Okay. And you'll see on this end I have the fringe, and I also have a little tail, and I'll need to weave that in. The thing I have to do now that's very time consuming is I have to, and I have 0 fingernails at this stage in my life, so I have to pull the knot. And as they say, that's a wrap. I like this scarf. It is long, but it's not too long. It's short enough that you can wear it as a nice, snug, short scarf without any excess. But it's long enough. You can wear it around, toss it over your shoulder. I like that color. I think my friend will like this a lot. Thanks so much for coming on this weaving journey with me. I haven't woven anything in probably almost a year. So it's nice to get back on the loom. See you later.